He didn't wire $20,000 on a Tuesday afternoon. That's not how it works. He wired $200 on a Tuesday afternoon, and then again 2 weeks later, and then $350 the month after because there was a situation with her mother, and then $500 because something happened at her job, and then nothing for 3 weeks because he was trying to hold firm, and then $800 because she cried on a video call and he hadn't heard her cry before. By the time he sat down and actually added it up, which took him 15 months to do, the number was $22,400. He told me he felt like he had dreamed it. I am John. I have lived in Thailand for 22 years and watched the same situations play out hundreds of times. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how incremental financial escalation works in Thai dating contexts, what drives it, what sustains it, and most importantly, the precise moments where it can be interrupted before the number becomes something you cannot explain to yourself. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel so you do not miss any future videos. Let's start at the beginning. The first thing to understand is that the money drip pattern is not a scam in the way most men visualize a scam. When most men hear Thai dating scam, they picture a fake profile, a woman who doesn't exist, someone in a call center running a script. That happens. That's a different video. What I am describing today is something more complicated, and in many ways, more dangerous, because the woman is real, the connection is real, the feelings on both sides may be entirely genuine, and the financial transfer still happens in a way that leaves the man hollowed out. The pattern begins at a specific threshold, the first small transfer, not the first request that often comes later. The pattern actually begins with the first gift that feels like it's coming from you, voluntarily, with no pressure attached. You meet a woman in Bangkok, maybe on a soak or through an app. Maybe she's working at a restaurant in Thonglor. Maybe she's a university student on a visa trip from Chiang Rai. You like her. You spend 3 days together. When you're leaving, you give her 3,000 baht, about $85. You frame it in your own head as a gift. She didn't ask. You just wanted to. It felt good. That moment is the beginning of the pattern, not because she engineered it, not because you were manipulated into it, but because you have now established, in the early architecture of the relationship, that money flows from you to her. And once that architecture exists, it becomes the load-bearing wall of everything that follows. This is not unique to Thailand. You could describe a version of this dynamic in relationships in Los Angeles or London. What makes it specific to certain Thai dating contexts is a combination of economic distance, cultural communication norms, and the family obligation structure, which we'll get into, that together create conditions where that early architecture hardens into something very difficult to dismantle without ending the relationship entirely. The economic distance is the starting point. If you are an American man earning an average income, let's say $65,000 to $80,000 a year, and the woman you are dating earns $18,000 a month working in a Bangkok office, which is roughly $500, then the gap between your financial realities is not a minor difference in salary. It is a different category of existence. What costs you a small inconvenience costs her a genuine crisis. When her motorbike breaks down and the repair is 4,000 baht, that is most of a week's salary for her. For you, it's lunch for a week. That asymmetry is not manufactured. It is simply the ground you are standing on. Most men from Western countries have never dated across that kind of gap before, and without realizing it, they begin making small financial decisions, paying for everything, covering costs that come up, offering help before it's asked. That feel generous and feel natural because within their own framework, the amounts are trivial. The $200 wire transfer that starts the long sequence is often sent, not because she manipulated him, but because he genuinely could not imagine letting something that costs him so little cause her so much difficulty. That instinct is not a flaw. It just has consequences he hasn't yet accounted for. The second mechanism, and this one is cultural, and this one requires careful understanding, is something called bun kun. Bun kun is the concept of sacred debt to parents. In Thai culture, children, particularly daughters from families outside of Bangkok, from the north, from the northeast, from the rural provinces, carry a deep structural obligation to send money home. This is not optional. It is not a preference. It is the foundational moral expectation of the family unit, and it runs through almost every financial conversation you will ever have with a woman from this background. The mother is sick. The father needs an operation. The family's land is at risk. The younger brother needs school fees. These are not inventions. In many cases, they are entirely true. What the man from Ohio or Oregon doesn't understand is that even when these situations are true, they arrive to him filtered through a system where he has already been identified, consciously or not, as the resource that can resolve them. He is, in the language some Thai women use among themselves, the ATM, not with contempt necessarily, simply as a functional description of his role in the equation. The word sponsor is used openly in certain parts of Bangkok's social economy. A sponsor is a Western man who provides consistent monthly support to a woman, usually without any formal agreement, and often while believing the relationship is exclusive and romantic in ways it may not be. The sponsor arrangement is not always predatory on the woman's side. Sometimes it is a survival strategy for sending 15 baht a month back to a province while earning 20,000 in the city. She needs the gap covered. He wants to be important to someone. The transaction meets both needs. The problem is that he often doesn't know he is in that arrangement. He thinks he is in a relationship. The money drip accelerates when bunkun situations arrive. And they do arrive, reliably, in almost every case I have watched. The first one is usually relatively small, a few $100s for a family emergency. His response to that first situation sets the template for everything afterward. If he sends money quickly, without asking too many questions, and the situation resolves, and she is grateful and warm and close to him in the days that follow, he has just learned that sending money produces closeness. That is a powerful conditioning loop. He may not be aware of it. He will act on it anyway. Here's what the middle phase of the pattern looks like in practical terms, because this is where most men are when they come looking for answers. You are roughly 4 to 7 months in. You have sent money a few times. Total amount in the range of $500 to $3,000. Nothing that has alarmed you yet. You are either visiting Thailand periodically or you have moved here and the relationship feels real. She is attentive, affectionate, consistent online. When you are together, you feel something that is hard to name but is definitely real. You are not naive. You have read the forum. You have told yourself you are being careful. The requests at this stage do not look like requests. They look like sharing. She tells something difficult is happening. She doesn't ask you for anything. She is actually quite good at not asking. This is where Kreng Jai, the Thai cultural norm of managing others' feelings and avoiding direct imposition, becomes a mechanism in the pattern. Kreng Jai she means will not ask you directly because asking directly would create discomfort and discomfort would threaten the harmony of the interaction. Instead, she shares the situation. She goes quiet after sharing it. She says, "My pen rai, never mind, don't worry about it," which in this context functions not as a genuine dismissal but as a test of whether you will step forward without being explicitly asked. And you do. Because you care about her and because the cost is manageable and because my pen rai in that tone of voice from someone you have feelings for is almost impossible not to respond to. Picture this. You are 6 months in, you are back in the States working, and she calls you on a Tuesday night. Something has happened with her mother. She doesn't say much. She seems to be holding it together. She says, "Don't worry." You ask what's wrong. She explains that her mother needs a procedure and the cost is 35,000 baht. You do the math. That's just under $1,000. You ask if she's okay. She says she'll figure it out. You send 30,000 baht, about $850, the next morning. She is grateful in a way that's hard to describe but easy to feel. 3 weeks later, you are closer than you have ever been. You have now sent roughly $4,200 in 7 months. Nothing has felt wrong. Every transfer felt like a choice. Every choice felt like it came from a good place. The next tier is what changes the number from manageable to significant. I want to know honestly, how many of you have already seen this pattern happen, either to yourself or to someone you know? Leave it in the comments. I read all of them. The escalation into the larger amounts happens through 3 specific mechanisms, and understanding all 3 is what lets you see the pattern before it completes. The first is urgency stacking. This is where situations start arriving closer together. The gap between the first family emergency and the second used to be 3 or 4 months. Now it is 6 weeks, then a month. The amounts also drift upward, not dramatically, but consistently. The 30 Zilbot situation is followed by one that is 45,000, then one that is 60,000. Each one arrives with its own specific context, its own legitimate seeming reason, and its own emotional weight. You cannot evaluate the pattern because you are inside the individual moments. From inside, each one looks like a separate situation. From outside, it is a sequence. The second mechanism is the relationship leverage point. Somewhere around month 8 or 9, in the cases I have observed, a moment arrives, usually during a disagreement or a period of reduced communication, where money and relationship security become explicitly linked for the first time. This doesn't always come as a threat. More often, it comes as a vulnerability. She becomes distant. She seems to be pulling back. When you ask what's wrong, there is a financial situation in the background that she has been handling alone because she didn't want to bother you. Your re-engagement with the relationship and your engagement with the financial situation happen at the same time. After this, the two things are connected in a way they were not before. This is the moment that, if you recognize it, is the most important decision point in the entire sequence. Not because she is necessarily doing this deliberately, but because once money and emotional closeness are fused in the relationship architecture, every future withdrawal of closeness will feel financially relevant to you, whether it is or not. The third mechanism is the escalation to major asks. This is where the number leaves the hundreds and enters the thousands for a single transfer. A business opportunity, a small restaurant, a beauty shop, a family plot of land that can be saved. The amounts in these asks are typically between $3,000 and $8,000. They are almost always presented as investments or loans, never as gifts. There is almost always a repayment plan discussed, even if only vaguely. There is almost never repayment. A client of mine, an engineer from Seattle mid-40s, went through this sequence over 16 months. The cumulative total when I sat with him and actually counted it was just over $19,000. He had never sent more than $500 in a single transfer. Not once did he think of himself as a man losing $19,000. He thought of himself as a man in a relationship that had some financial complexity. Those are very different mental frames, and the gap between them is where the money drip pattern lives. There is something I want to address directly, because I see this confusion constantly in men who are trying to make sense of their situation. The question of whether she planned this, in most cases involving the money drip pattern with a woman you have an actual relationship with, the answer is not a clean yes or no. The pattern often emerges without a premeditated design on her part. She did not sit down on the first date and calculate a 14-month financial extraction. What she did, in many cases, was make decisions within a system of pressures and obligations and cultural frameworks that consistently pointed toward you as a resource. The decisions felt natural to her because they were consistent with how her world works. Your decisions felt natural to you because they were consistent with how care and generosity feel to a Western man in a new relationship. The fact that it wasn't designed does not make the outcome different. You still spend $20,000. The lack of a conspiracy doesn't reduce the number. What it does change is the conversation you need to have with yourself about what happened and why. There are cases, and I will not pretend otherwise, where the pattern is more deliberate. Women who have run this sequence before, who know the timing, who understand the leverage points and use them consciously. These situations exist. Pattaya has its own version of this. Parts of the Sukhumvit nightlife economy have a version of this. The tell in those cases is usually the speed. The first financial ask comes earlier. The escalation is faster, and the emotional availability tends to track precisely with the financial transfers in a way that feels, if you're paying attention, slightly mechanical. But the majority of men who end up at $20,000 were not dealing with a professional. They were dealing with someone who genuinely liked them, genuinely had family pressures, and genuinely operated in a world where a Western man with a decent income is expected, by everyone including herself, to help absorb those pressures. Understanding that does not mean you should absorb them. It means you should understand what you are actually dealing with before you decide what to do. Now to the tactical question. What do you actually do? Not advice column do. Operationally do. The first intervention point is the earliest one, and it requires something that feels counterintuitive in the early warmth of a new connection. You need to establish, clearly and without drama, a financial frame in the first 3 months. This does not mean telling her you won't help her. It means making clear, through your behavior, that money moves slowly in this relationship. You pay for dates. You enjoy yourself. When a situation arises and she shares it, you express care and you ask questions and you do not immediately reach for your phone. You wait. You see what she does with the waiting. A woman who is with you for reasons beyond financial access will navigate the waiting. A woman for whom you are primarily a resource will escalate. Most men do not do this because the amounts in the first 3 months are small enough that intervening feels out of proportion. That is the design of the entry phase. The entry costs are low enough to disable your risk assessment instincts. You need to apply your risk assessment instincts anyway. The second intervention is around the family emergency structure. You need to understand Bun Kun before you are in a situation where you need to respond to it in real time. Once you understand that sending money home is a structural obligation and not an episodic crisis, you can have a different kind of conversation. You can ask calmly and early what her family situation is, what her regular obligations are, whether she sends money home monthly and how much. These are not invasive questions in the context of a real relationship. A woman who is with you for genuine reasons will answer them. Her answers will tell you exactly what the ongoing financial reality is. You can then decide what you are and are not willing to contribute with full information rather than being surprised by emergencies every 6 weeks. The third intervention is around the leverage point moment, that month 8 or month 9 shift where emotional availability and financial situations start fusing. When you notice that her distance and a financial situation have appeared at the same time, stop. Do not respond to both simultaneously. Address the emotional dynamic separately from the financial one. Ask directly what is happening between you. Separate the relationship conversation from the money conversation. If they cannot be separated, if every time you try to discuss the relationship, the financial situation enters the room, that is important information about what the relationship actually is. One note on the digital version of this pattern, because it has become increasingly common in the last several years. The money drip sequence now frequently plays out between men who have never been to Thailand, men who met someone on a dating app or on social media, who have been communicating for weeks or months, who have developed genuine feelings for someone they have never been in the same room with. The dynamics are largely the same. The economic gap, the family obligation structure, the gradual escalation, all of it translates to a long-distance context. What changes is that the emotional leverage is entirely constructed through communication rather than physical proximity, which actually makes the leverage stronger in some respects. You have nothing but the messages. The messages are the relationship, and a skilled communicator, whether deliberately or instinctively, can construct enormous emotional weight through messages alone. The additional risk in the digital context is the complete absence of environmental reality checks. When you are in Bangkok, you can observe. You can see where she lives. You can meet someone she knows. You can cross-reference what she tells you against a physical world. When you are in Denver corresponding with someone in Chiang Mai, you have only what she sends you. The gap between her account of her life and the actual reality of her life can be significant, and you have no mechanism for detecting it. If you have not met someone in person and you have sent money, you are in the digital version of this pattern. The rule for that situation is blunt. No more transfers until you have physically been in the same place. If the relationship is real, that meeting will happen. If the meeting keeps being deferred while the financial requests continue, the deferrals are the answer. Let me bring this back to where we started. The man who ends up at $22,000 over 15 months did not lose that money in a single bad decision. He lost it in 100 small decisions, each of which felt reasonable in the moment, each of which was responding to something genuine. Genuine need, genuine emotion, genuine connection. The tragedy of the money drip pattern is not that it involves bad people. Often it involves two people who, in a different context with a smaller economic gap, would simply be in a complicated relationship. The economic gap turns the complication into a mechanism. And the mechanism, once it is running, is very difficult to stop because stopping it feels identical to ending the relationship. That is the architecture of it. The money and the relationship become the same structure. You cannot remove one without threatening the other. And the man who has already sent $8,000 over 9 months is not psychologically positioned to say this pattern needs to stop, because stopping the pattern means confronting the possibility that some significant portion of what he thought was a relationship was a financial arrangement he didn't fully understand he was in. Here is the truth about that moment. Understanding the pattern does not mean the relationship was fake. It means the relationship was operating inside a set of economic and cultural pressures that you did not understand when you entered it, and that those pressures shaped her behavior in ways she may not have been entirely conscious of herself. That is a more complicated truth than "she scammed me," and it is harder to hold, but it is usually more accurate. What changes for a man once he understands this is not that he becomes cold or suspicious or unwilling to be generous. What changes is that he stops confusing generosity with passivity. He stops sending money because it is easier than having a hard conversation. He stops responding to financial situations before he has asked the questions that would tell him what he is actually responding to. He learns to distinguish between a woman who is with him and also has real financial pressures, which is common and navigable, and a woman for whom his financial capacity is the primary reason he is still in the picture. That distinction is not always easy to make, but it becomes much easier to make before the first transfer than after the 10th. The money drip pattern does not announce itself. It builds itself quietly from the architecture of genuine feeling and real economic distance and cultural frameworks you did not know existed. The only way to interrupt it is to understand it before it starts. Creating these videos takes real time alongside my consulting work, so if this was useful, please support the channel by subscribing. It tells the algorithm to show this to other men who need it. See you in the next video.